We at the council know that women entrepreneurs are the engine of our national economy and are going to be at the forefront of the economic recovery following the pandemic. We've received a lot of interest in today's webinar. Over 500 of you registered to attend. We received a lot of questions. So Jess and Jill are going to do their best to make sure that they answer all of your questions about PPP funding, about capital resources for women entrepreneurs, and about forming a relationship with your local lender. A quick disclaimer, of course, this webinar is not meant to replace individualized legal or financial advice that you would receive and definitely should receive from an attorney, a tax preparer, a lender, etc. If you're joining us here today for the first time, I would like to take this time to tell you a little bit about the National Women's Business Council. So we are a nonpartisan, independent federal advisory council established to provide advice and policy recommendations to the President, Congress, and the Small Business Administration. We have 15 council members from across the country, from Iowa, Idaho, Texas, my home state of Florida, Virginia, Maryland, and New Hampshire. We also have 6 representatives of national women's business organizations, including the Veneta Project, the Women's Presidents Organization, Women's Business Enterprise National Council, the Association of Women's Business Centers, the Association of Women in Science, and the Center for Women's Entrepreneurial Leadership at Babson College. All of these amazing women's business organizations have resources available for women entrepreneurs to navigate the COVID-19 pandemic. You can visit our website, nwbc.gov. If you go to our About section, there's links to all of those organizations. So with that, let's get this conversation going. You can follow along with us on Twitter at NWBC using the hashtag Webinar Wednesday. So I'm honored to introduce Council Member Jessica Flynn. I mentioned she is the founder and CEO of Red Sky. It's a strategic communications firm in Boise, Idaho. Prior to starting Red Sky, Jessica was actually a producer for various television news stations across the country. She founded Red Sky in 2008 and has led the company from startup to Idaho's largest strategic communications firm. Jessica is also a Boise Arts and History Commissioner, and she serves on various boards, including the Women's and Children's Alliance and the Boise State Venture College. She is amazingly an honorary commander of the Idaho Air National Guard Mission Support. She has a bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of Texas, and most importantly, just kidding, she serves as NWBC's Rural Women's Entrepreneur Subcommittee Chair. Take it away, Jess.
Thanks, Nina, and thanks to all of you joining us from all across the country for this really important conversation. I am truly honored to introduce who I have now come to know and dub as a Wonder Woman of banking and community banking. Jill Castilla is President and CEO of Citizens Bank of Edmond, Oklahoma. And while she has been recognized among her peers as some of the best community banker of the year and most powerful woman in banking, she's also very well regarded in her community and in her state as one of the most admired CEOs in Oklahoma. So Jill brings to the table this great combination of dedication to community and community banking, and also innovative ideas of how community banking can evolve to help during this time and going forward. And we really thank Senator Inhofe of Oklahoma for introducing us to Jill, and so we can have her here to answer a few questions for us and for you. So thanks, Jill, for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, and it's great to be here.
So we've got a couple initial questions that I'm going to ask Jill to kick this conversation off, and then we'll be monitoring the Q&A so that we can bring forward your specific questions for wherever you are in the world. So I want to really start off with something that Nina mentioned, and that we are seeing and hearing concerns from the small business community, particularly women-owned small businesses and minority-owned businesses, about some of the challenges they had in accessing these PPP funds. And we are seeing and hearing more success stories for Main Street banks and community-owned banks, and yours is a great example of that. So we want to really hear about how was Citizens Bank of Edmond able to kind of step up during this time and really respond quickly to helping some of these small businesses and women-owned businesses?
Yeah, thanks for that, Jessica. We really embraced the sense of the Senate when they passed the CARES Act. They specifically called out wanting to ensure that the Paycheck Protection Program funds were accessible to minority business owners, veterans business owners, and women business owners, as well as those others that are in need because of the crisis that we've been facing. So right from the beginning, we rallied our team who has a heart for the underserved, underbanked in our community, and wanting to ensure that we are breaking down any perceived barriers there could be to credit. We have a really strong social media presence and a lot of great partnerships throughout our community and our market area. And so we reached out to those groups, asked if they would coordinate getting the word out about the programs, really when they were in even the development of the Paycheck Protection Program. Even prior to that, though, whenever we started seeing the national disaster unfold, knowing the disaster loan program was available through the SBA, we were at the forefront to rally our community to ask our governor to deem the state a disaster area so then we could qualify for disaster funds. So that was really kind of laying the foundation then for the CARES Act and whenever that those additional resources came about. By laying that groundwork, and I think this is why community banks have been very successful in getting funds out to these smaller businesses that sometimes don't have sophisticated resources. They don't have a great partnership with an SBA, CPA, and to be able to just basically provide this application for them. They're really the ones on QuickBooks doing their own finances. They're the ones trudging through some of these application processes. And so that credibility, I think, that the community banks had, and those strong resources, knowing that what we were going to face from a realistic standpoint, that these weren't just going to be easy applications that we could just upload into a portal and then they're automatically approved. This would be hand-holding a lot of small businesses through this process, and it requires the trust and that understanding that you're going to be heard and that we're going to be patient with you, and that we know that this isn't going to be a 15-minute process, but maybe a 3-day process to get you a $1,000 loan, and that you trust that person, because they're who you see in the grocery store aisles under normal conditions, or we're neighbors, and our kids play on the same teams, and we know that we're in this together. And I think that's why it made it very successful in reaching some communities that may have otherwise had difficulties accessing. But I will say that whenever even we opened up the PPP program, the first in line were those with those complete packages that had strong relationships with experts that could provide a great application right from the beginning that was easy to process. And it took effort to ensure that we were getting the place in line for those that didn't have that same level of accessibility.
I think that the resounding response we've heard, and you hit it exactly, is relationships, and those banks of which people were able to interact and be heard and have almost a Sherpa to kind of guide them through this process. That helped a lot more. And I'm really curious too, because I saw in some articles about you where it wasn't just those that were already banking with you, but others in the community recognized community banks were helping, and that's who I should go through in this process. Are you seeing that more and more, that people are turning to your bank and other community banks when they recognize that need for the relationships?
Right. We were almost serving as matchmakers even throughout the nation. I provided my cell phone number on social media publicly multiple times, and then responded by DMs to Twitter and Facebook messages and LinkedIn. Someone was in Pennsylvania and Harrisburg, then I knew that Centric Bank in Harrisburg would be great at someone that it could really treat them with value and process an application. So, and also just answering questions, whether someone banked with us or not, just having the accessibility to be able to say, my business just started in January. Am I going to be eligible for this program? What am I going to be expected to produce? And without having that banking relationship and having someone where you can ask casual questions, because applying for any loan is a scary process, and it is very vulnerable state for someone seeking credit. And so to be able to have a relationship where you can ask questions to someone, we made it as an effort to say, okay, we're going to be like unconditionally accessible, that 24/7 someone's going to be able to access me or one of our lenders anytime, no matter if they lived in our area or not, whether they banked with us or not. Like, we're going to be accessible, and then we're going to be as knowledgeable as we possibly can be in these programs and be as transparent as we could possibly be. And so community bankers replicated around the nation. Through the wonderful value of social media, where you're able to see that in action, and so you know who is around that's taking nationwide applications or statewide applications or taking non-customer applications, so then we could connect borrowers to those banks that were processing them, and that you knew that they would be well cared for. But that relationship just is, I think it's the one thing that's really been proven, that small businesses really need someone that they can trust and that they can text and call and feel comfortable asking kind of maybe even what they think are silly questions, but are ones that are imperative and to ensure that a loan application will be successful.
Two quick things. Besides following NWBC on social media channels, I will give a plug to our guest today. Jill Castilla is very active on Twitter, so if you do use Twitter, go ahead and follow her and see some of the things that she's doing. Jill, you brought up one aspect that we've gotten questions on prior, related to folks that have been in business for less than a year or less than 2 years, and women-owned businesses and entrepreneurs were part of what was driving our economy, and we were seeing a lot of growth of small businesses started by women. But it almost in some ways works against them, I believe, if they were in business less than a year to apply for the PPP. Is that correct, or has that been adjusted?
We really never got some great guidelines from the SBA, honestly, from a business formation. We have a hard date that I think it's February the 15th, 2020, that you have to be in business by that date in order to qualify for the program. And it's easy if you've got a payroll to really be able, if you're in business on February the 1st and you have a payroll, you have payroll reports, and that's an easy process to apply typically for the PPP. Where it becomes a little bit more complicated is if you're a sole proprietor or 1099, and you there's banks that have a little bit, you have more, there's more ambiguity around what that qualification is. And so I would just encourage, if someone doesn't have a year of formation, but they started prior to that February 15th date, to contact their bank to see what their way of saying what they qualified for from a dollar amount standpoint would be, because it's not explicit. So if you existed before February the 15th, 2020, there's still the opportunity to apply for the PPP. You would just want to ask your bank about it.
Going to another question that we'd heard quite a bit about the size of the PPP loans, and there are reports on the SBA site after every phase, and I think they're updating them now weekly, of the size of loans that are going out. In that first phase, we saw the average size was 206,000, but then when we're hearing from women-owned businesses, they're reporting needing much less than that in order to sustain their payroll, and on average they were at 127,000 when reporting that out. What were you seeing at your bank, and what are you understanding from other community banks about the actual size that's helping small businesses right now?
Yeah, so we're right around 450 loans that we've originated at the bank. And in phase one of PPP, we were, even though the dollar amounts were larger in that phase, we still were very small compared to what was happening nationally or even at the state level. Our average PPP in the first phase of that program was $65,000, and the median, so if you lined up all of our loans and got the very middle one, that was only $30,000. In phase two, once the 1099s and the sole proprietors were able to apply, we saw that amount even further decrease. So the average was 40,000 and the median was just 10,000. So overall in the program, in our 450 something loans, our average is 54,000, 20,000 is our median. But with that, we have a much higher percentage of women, female borrowers in the PPP than what the percentage of female business owners are in our state. So at our state level, we're like at 30% of our businesses, small businesses are owned by women. And we were at 37% of our total loans that were originated to women. But in the PPP, the second phase, that number shot up to 44% of our loans were women-owned businesses. I think too, it helps that you have a female-led business in our bank. So as the CEO, I just naturally have a lot more connections with professional women, and their accessibility. I think it's perceived to be less of a barrier. So I think that benefits our bank quite a bit. But we also reached out to the minority communities in a very proactive way. Like I mentioned before, that's we make an effort, even though we're small and not really required to, from a legal standpoint, to make that level of effort is part of the soul of our bank, to ensure that we have equitable access to credit. So we also have a really high percentage. I don't have it with me right now, but of minority business owners, and I would say 100% of those borrowers I was working with were either minority or female business owners.
We've also got a question previously related to, and I definitely want to come back to some of your outreach, but I do want to make sure I'm as the questions pop into the queue, and some folks, thank you, have submitted them ahead of time too. Can someone apply for a PPP twice? As in, when they applied the first time, they got, say, $6,000 when mathematically they should have received a higher amount. Are business owners allowed to apply for a PPP twice?
So technically you cannot. The system won't allow you to receive two authorizations. But in that specific case, where if a business actually qualified for more than what they received from the PPP, they can go to their bank and the bank can revise that amount. And so again, some of these programs, even though they have these hard cutoffs, have some nuances available to them. And so you would want to go back to the same bank and talk with your lender, especially if they're the ones proactively telling you qualify for more, and they can make that a type of adjustment. But it has to be at that bank. If you go to another bank and try to apply, they don't receive that duplicate error until they submit for authorization. So it's very long into the process, and you're kind of using someone else's slot in line. And you want to disclose too that maybe you've applied somewhere else. We saw a ton of duplicate applications, so I don't think there's any shame in doing that at all. But if you receive an authorization, you're not going to be able to get a second one. But I would encourage, if you're having difficulty getting access to the PPP and you have not received an authorization, that you can have multiple applications out there. I would just disclose to the lender that that's what you're doing, because this money is going to go away at some point in time, and you need to be working with someone that's going to get the funds to you. But again, disclose that. If you receive authorization